The second source for opportunities relates to changes in a given industry. The first big change that can lead to entrepreneurial opportunities would appear when an industry grows from emerging to more organized. That is the switch from vertical to horizontal. What vertical means is that when an industry emerges, it is organized vertically in the way the few players that are present have to do everything themselves to serve the market. As an example, when the computer industry was born and started to develop in the 50s and 60s, it was then organized vertically. The dominant players were pretty much doing everything: building the chip, designing the hardware, the operating system, developing application softwares, and doing maintenance on all of this. This was the time when IBM, Burroughs, and C.R. Wang dominated until the 70s. Then the industry reached a point where that vertical organization was no longer valid, because it became impossible for one single player to remain at the edge of all the core competencies and technologies involved in each of the layers of the value-added chain. This is the moment when the industry switches from vertical to horizontal. Dominant players then specializes on one layer of the value chain and optimizes their core know-how, strategy, resource allocation, and business model to remain competitive on that one layer. Because every one of these layers, chip, hardware, operating system, software, maintenance, describe a unique business totally different from the others. And all the players then collaborate in one global ecosystem. And in emerging domains as robotics, wearables, and the Internet of Things, it will be interesting to observe what will happen with regards to that change in the organization of these industries. But interestingly enough, as some industries keep maturing, we started recently to observe the opposite phenomenon in the smartphone and tablet PC industry. That is back to vertical. Because the environment has become so mature, users more demanding, more educated, that for offering the optimal user experience, it becomes mandatory to increase again the control over the value chain, which leads to more vertical integration. Apple, Google, Microsoft, to optimize the design, the value added in their ecosystem started this movement backwards, acquiring in the value chain chip and hardware companies to better control at the deepest level performances and design. And also at the same time getting more involved downwards in the value chain in operating system and the application layer. Another change that is worth foreseeing for the entrepreneur is technology mutation in an industry. In the video editing and broadcast industry, for a long time, editing was about cutting and sticking magnetic tapes physically with Scotch tapes. The emergence of computers changed that. The first company that understood it was not one of the big established players, Sony or others. It was a startup named Avid that demonstrated for the first time a software that could perform editing tasks, which led to a whole new market called virtual editing. This was limited at the beginning, so none of the existing players took that very seriously, and Avid dominated the market for several decades. And the last change I'd like to discuss is change in the regulation in some industry that may also open some opportunities. The law has recently made it possible to sell drugs online in France. As a result, a number of startup projects are now exploring that field. A few years ago, the telecommunication industry was also deregulated, which led to a new type of players, wholesalers, who were buying huge quantity of bandwidth and reselling it in smaller parts at a higher price. Uber, Airbnb are today shaking some regulated industries that haven't changed for years. In their case, even before deregulation happens. Recent studies suggest that regulated industry offer on average higher price and lower customer service, which means that public authorities have some tangible justifications for changing that and deregulating some of these industries. That is definitely something to follow. So in this video, we discussed about the first two sources of opportunity for the entrepreneur. The first source is the identification of trends. We illustrated that with a number of significant trends, like the emergence of middle class in developing countries, new innovation model using constraints, resource scarcity as opportunities. Open innovation, fab labs, technology trends like sensors, the cost of IT resources reaching almost zero are other examples. Second source is a recognition of changes in the organization of an industry. These changes can take three forms: the switch from vertical to horizontal, technology mutation, and deregulation.